All right, guys, we were just going to have our third podcast tonight. There's no specific agenda, but what we were going to talk about was green coffee. We had a lot of questions this year about what we were doing. A lot of people have been watching us on the different sites, Facebook, and all that good stuff. And I post like crazy when I can. And so we've had a lot of questions. We answered a lot of questions on the first podcast about exporting coffee and a few random things. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about how we actually dry the coffee. We'll start out by saying I'm Ashley Williams, Legacy Farms Coffee. That's .com for the webpage. Legacy Farms Coffee on Facebook, Legacy Farms Coffee 2010 on Instagram, and I think it's Legacy Farms Coffee 200 on YouTube. And so this will be recorded and played back later on those. But I have a farm in Cerro Bueno, Honduras. We grow coffee there. We try to grow pretty good coffee and pay our workers and do a lot of projects for the workers. But we try to offer, sustainable jobs. We try to give them loans that'll help them start their own little micro business, barbershop, a couple of corn grinding companies. I think we've financed 4 farms through our little farm bank. And at this point, 3 of those farms are exporting coffee. San Diego and Pedro needed their money a little faster. So we actually, we're just going to buy their coffee next year. But just some different projects. We take suggestions, obviously, but it's just trying to meet the needs. So we don't have any one big project. Just a lot of small ones to try to figure out, what the people need and what their little community would take. So that's been one of the main things that we've done with the farm. Of course, now you can see the background. There's the big roaster. We have sample roasters, things like that, and that's the shelf. So this is our little storefront in Mountain Ridge, Kansas. The main farm is in Cerro Bueno, Honduras. We have a small farm in Pavas, Honduras. And so we export all those coffees each year. We're going to put out something next week called The Bean's Life, and we'll take you through the life of the bean all the way to the cup. Anybody at any time is welcome to join in, ask questions, things like that. I'm still trying to figure all this out. So I see somebody is watching, but I haven't figured out exactly how to have them come on just yet, but I'll be working on that as I go. Once the coffee is picked, the workers just quickly will bring it up to the farm. We'll bring it up to the top of the hill of the farm at about 2:30. It gets weighed, puts into a tank. According to what process, it goes different, 1 or 3 different directions. But once that coffee is pulped, we have to have this steady drying process. So you don't want to be dry one day, wet one day, dry one day. So we have just some basic rules of thumb that we go by. If a coffee is less than 20% humidity, it has to go inside the bodega every night. Until that point, it gets raked to a high point on the patio. All 6 patios are designed with a different pitch. And so it'll go to a high point on the patio and get covered up with black plastic. The high point is so that if it rains, the rain doesn't go under the nylon and get to the coffee. So the idea is to keep that coffee on a steady decline from being fully humid, or whatever you would want to say, to 12.5% humidity. Some of the coffees we go ahead and pull, we found that once they're in the bodega, they're still pretty hot. And so we pull them at 13.1 to 13.4%. We bring them into the bodega or the lab, just wherever we have space. Those bags are similar to a fertilizer bag, so they're still breathable. So those bags will be kept open for a couple of days so that heat can get out of them, because they'll be over 100 degrees in the bag from being on that patio. And from that point, if we can dry it on the patio, obviously that's closer. That's the best option. If the weather's sort of sketchy, we have big solar dryers, which are just basically would look like giant greenhouses. They range from like 25 feet to 80 feet long. We've rented a farm about 8 miles, 10 miles from our farm. It has a very unique climate. It's about 2,000 feet lower than what our farm is. It's hotter there. So usually majority of the time, it's a lot better weather than what we have. So when the weather it's not hot enough, windy enough for us to be able to dry the coffee on the farm, then we have to take it to a place called Llano. And this year we did a 5-year contract with a place that's got a tiny adobe house. Pedro enjoys camping out. And so we put Pedro in Llano for weeks at a time. And every morning he'll have some of the neighbors come and they work by the hour. They'll help him get all the coffee spread out. Then every afternoon we do what we call tortillas. And there's the big flat piece of nylon I think it's 16 feet wide. They put the coffee in the middle and then they just wrap it up. And then we put rocks on it and stuff to keep the wind from blowing it back open again. And it'll sit there, from the time the sun goes down to the time the sun comes up and all the dew is off. That is our best option for drying coffee. It dries a lot faster there. There is probably such a thing as drying coffee too fast, but so far we haven't had a problem with that. It'll dry a washed coffee in about 3 to 4 days. A red honey processed coffee will take 6 or 7 days. It's all depending on how hot it is, how much wind it is. And we're still under 2 weeks on a full natural. In later issues, we're going to talk more about what actually a full natural is versus some of the other processes. But so it looks like we've got Wiki Farms. Okay, that's Bill. I think Bill just ordered some, if I'm not wrong, he just did a green order from us here not long ago. But we're going to get into more of the processes and what's the difference between machine washed, canal washed, yellow honey, red honey, black honey, and then a pulped natural and a full natural. But all of those things go into play when we start drying the coffee. So once that coffee is out on the nylon or in the solar dryer or on the patio, somebody is constantly, not an hour goes by when somebody doesn't have a big wooden rake or rake I've made out of a little PVC pipe, and they're not moving that coffee just constantly. Especially the red honey, it is super sticky. And so it's really going to have to be, if you leave it there very long, you're going to have to literally scratch it off of the plastic because it'll stick. And so that's where it got its name from, the red honey, because it's red, it's sticky, and it's sweet. The full natural has to be cared for a lot more because if you squeeze it very hard, the bean is still in the cherry, and so you'll pop that bean out of the cherry, and that's not what we want to happen. We want that bean to stay inside the cherry and soak up all that juice. And so that's going to be what's called a full natural. We mainly stick to the 3 processes: canal washed, red honey, and full natural. A few people have asked for some different things, but the natural is harder to dry. It's a lot harder to dry on the nylon. It's a lot better to dry it on the concrete. We have these giant 2.5 foot wide spatulas where we scoot under it, flip it. But there's somebody that's constantly walking that coffee and drying it. On the patio, there's 6 different patios. There's somebody working the different patios. But if there's, for example, a dried coffee, a washed coffee, and then on another patio, there's a red honey. That red honey is super sticky and it'll stick to your boots. And so if you're working on the honey, you don't go into any of the other coffees. You'll sit down, you'll have to pick all the stuff off your boots. Then you'll take the boots off and go wash them. So because they're going to be sticky. And then you'll go and rake the washed coffee. And so it's sort of a pain for them. A lot of times they don't understand what's the big deal. But if you have a coffee that was picked Monday and you have a coffee that's picked Thursday, they're obviously going to be 2 completely different humidities, and you don't want to mix those. You don't want to mix the honey processed with the washed because you've got 2 completely different flavor profiles. On our farm, we have a Bourbon, Icatu, Perinema, Lempira, Marciesa, Mario Hipe. I may be forgetting something. And then we have the coffees that some of our workers bring in to dry. So on the patio is it's very technical how we keep up with everything. The people have to really be on their toes to make sure you don't mix coffees or contaminate one coffee with another coffee. The drying patio has a 6-foot fence around it so that dogs, chickens, things like that can't come up on the patio and do what they tend to do. So we have little processes with changing your boots when you get on the patio. If they go on a bathroom break or a lunch break, they take those boots off, put on their street shoes, and then when they come back, they put on their patio boots again. So it's all little things to keep the quality up. When we're in Llano, it's like a 45-minute drive to get there. So obviously we have to be able to test that coffee to make sure it doesn't get too dry. Too dry means that we're losing weight, which is losing money. But also for the roaster, he's going to be hard pressed to do a good job at roasting a coffee that's 8%. That coffee is going to dry up. A lot of it's probably going to burn up in the roaster. So we want to deliver that coffee to the roaster around 11.5 to 12%, something like that. And the coffee is constantly drying on its way from Honduras to here. Once that coffee is dried, or starts to get dry, every 30 minutes or an hour, we're having to test it. We use an Agtronics Coffee Pro is the name of the tester. We have a couple of those for we have one in drying house. We have, I have to keep one in the truck. So we have a couple of them. In the lab, we have I can't think the name of it. It used to be called Doyle 600 was the older model, but it's a laboratory version of a moisture tester, and it gives you an exact moisture. Samples have to be pulled. We have to wait about 10 to 15 minutes for that sample to cool down before we test it. I think the lab moisture testers are like $2,000. And so we bought our first one this year to be a lot more exact. The little Grain Pro moisture testers, they have to be calibrated. So you can't just buy one, stick it on a shelf and do all your moistures with it. You're going to have to constantly. We send them in every week and sometimes every 3 or 4 days and have them recalibrated. Now that we have a laboratory tester, then we can calibrate on site. But with places like Llano being so hot and windy, a lot of times the coffee will dry too fast. And of course, we're losing a lot of profit and a lot of quality when that happens. So next year, we're going to have to make the investment to actually have a high-end laboratory tester there on site and then have one back on the farm because we're always drying coffee in both locations. And we need our guy in the field to be able to call us and say, this coffee's at 15%. And at that point, somebody needs to be leaving the farm and heading out to the field because with a good day, it could easily hit 12.5% within an hour and a half. And so, like I said, quality is the biggest thing. We don't like to lose money. We had a coffee last year that dried to 8%. It was very hard to roast and just had very little flavor. So luckily we have people wanting to buy pumpkin spice and Jamaica Me Crazy, French vanilla, Southern pecan. I'm looking at some of the ones up here. So you can make a bad coffee taste pretty good with those. And there's a demand for it. So that works out pretty good with us. Somebody's asking what percentage would you say is wasted in a typical harvest? If you're talking about what percentage is wasted as far as like the grapes, the cherries that are left on or wasted in the field, probably quite a bit because we're having a lot of labor problems right now. These big mega farms are coming down and they're sending great big trucks and they'll get all of our young workers and take them for 3 months. And the young guys like the adventurers are going somewhere else. And so then we're stuck with not enough workers and poor workers. And so we lose a couple thousand pounds a year that way. We'll easily lose 1,000 to 2,000 pounds for coffee that gets a little bit too dry. Just that little bit of weight difference, it makes a big difference. As far as coffee that's wasted once it's dry, there's very little waste. The husk comes off and we put that into the organic lake. And so that part gets reused. The coffee cherry, some of that we bring into the States. We cup it just like we do the coffee, bring in the States, and there's people that buy that. And But as far as the defects and things that we pull out, because right now the women in Honduras are selecting the coffee. So as far as that waste goes, it's almost zero, because we'll take that coffee and roast it in Honduras and sell it to some of the local markets. Oh, excuse me. I haven't had enough coffee today. So that coffee is called Huacuco. We jokingly refer to it as Folgers. It's sold to a low commodity buyer, and it becomes things like Cafe Oro and some of the more low-end coffees. You can buy them in country for maybe $2 a pound. And that is, again, that's what the poor people are used to. Even if a guy has a farm, a lot of the guys that work for us have farms and have never tasted their coffee. They'll taste the Huacuco, the green, but they'll sell the best coffee to the market, and then it'll get cupped. And most of the time it probably gets shipped to the US or countries like that. So they're used to eating that or drinking that lower grade coffee. And that's sort of what they come accustomed to. They throw a little sugar in it and a tiny bit of milk if they have milk, which most of them don't, no refrigerators. And that's what they drink every day, numerous times a day. Little bitty tiny kids are drinking coffee. I've seen coffee in a baby bottle. But as far as the waste goes, we limit that as much as we can. Right now, the farm is open to anybody that wants to come in and pick coffee. They can come pick it for free and keep what they pick. Because anytime you have a sloppy picker out there and they're skipping a lot of coffee, that's food for the insects. And we have a boring beetle. I think it's a beetle, but it's called their boca. And so they'll come in, bore a hole in, lay their eggs, but they eat those coffee beans. And so that makes their colony stronger for the next year. We don't use pesticides or insecticides on the farm, so we have to depend on traps and stuff like that. As far as loss goes in that area, we just take an acceptable loss, because I'd rather not use an insecticide. I'd rather have a little bit more loss. And we've created a small company there selling 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of Huacuco every year. And so we sell it for about $1.10 a pound, roasted and bagged. And then our workers make a business out of that by reselling it to the little stores, who again resell it to the end consumer. So right now, I think we get 35 Lempira for a pound of coffee. It's pretty cheap, but it gives us a place to send our coffee, and it gives them a second income by being able to get out and hustle and selling some of it. But we try to do as much organic as possible. So we have a lot of composting that's going on and things like that. Then once the compost has been turned a few times, it'll go on the plants as organic mass. Some of the things as far as drying, in the drying fields, you have to worry about dogs, because we don't have a fence good enough to keep the dogs out. But just worrying about weather to make sure that, the coffee gets, bundled up and tucked away for the night, or if there's a storm, things like that. Once that coffee is picked and gets in the bodega, it'll be tested a couple times a day and monitored to make sure it's at the right humidity. Every once in a while, we have to end up putting it back out in the field, or out on the field, or in the drying patio, and dry it down just a little bit more. But about 13.1 to 13.4 is generally a good rule of thumb. And then by the time it's dried, and within the next week or 10 days, it'll be right at that 12.5 mark. And that's where we want it to be. And by the time it gets to States, it'll still be on 12%, 12.1%, which is a good spot for the coffee to be. Anything wetter will tend to cause mold. Anything drier, the roasters don't really like it, because they're going to lose a lot more. It's sort of a rule of thumb. If you're just doing basic calculations when you're roasting, you can just say 6 pounds of green is going to give you about 5 pounds of roasted. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. If it's really dry, you're going to change your ratios quite a bit, and then you've got a green coffee buyer that's going to lose a lot more money. They're having to use 6.5 pounds to make 5 pounds. And again, I've never cupped the coffee, but I'm just assuming there's got to be some quality loss when the coffee is already that dry. Some people do take a mister and spray it. I guess you could do that. That would probably help in the roast, but I'm not sure again how that would affect quality or anything like that. Some of the main things that we do are just keep the coffee clean, patio clean, just really take good care of the coffee while we're drying it, to make sure every coffee is raked a different direction every time. So the first time it's up and down, then left and right, and then we go 45, and to make sure that that coffee is turned as much as humanly possible, so that all those beans dry evenly. The core of that bean is dried evenly. So anything we can think of, we'll try it, as far as different fermentations and things like that. But if there's any different way we can dry it, we will. We haven't done mechanical drying because to me that's $50,000 or $60,000 investment, but it seems like you're drying it really fast. 36 hours it goes from being a wet bean to 12.5%. That seems like really fast. So at this point, we're able to dry the coffee the way we like to dry it, and not affect anything quality wise. We're generally getting, our lowest score last year was an 83, with the highest being an 88. The year before that, the lowest score was 85 to 89. This year we're waiting for the cupping score. It should be in any day. So we just sent off like 50 something samples to be cupped. So they'll let us know pretty quick what those are. And then from those 50 something samples, we'll mix them all together. And then according to what the flavor profiles are and the cupping scores. And once that's done, then we'll take samples, or the company comes and takes samples, and then they're going to certify the lot. And so once they do that, each burlap bag will have an individual serial number on it. So you'll be able to go to Dominion Origin website, look up that bag number, tell who certified it, who cupped it, what the cupping scores, profiles, and all were. Normally, if you ask, we can get you a copy of a cupping score. A lot of people may or may not know what that is, but this is just a basic cupping score. It will tell you right here, this says peach and floral are the aromas, and floral and cremosa are the flavors. I'm not real sure what cremosa is, like creamy, and floral is like flowery. So I'll be anxious to taste that coffee. That's actually a Mario Hipe. That's actually the coffee that we won 4th place with in the coffee competition. I think that Bill that's watching us, you can ask Bill if I think he's the guy I've been talking to, and he just ordered like 6 or 7 pounds of a green coffee. Hadn't gotten to him yet, I don't think, but he's actually getting a sample of the Mario Hipe that we did the competition in. And so I think there was 89 farmers that are in the Marcala Coffee Fair this year, and then in our division, and we won 4th place. And so for us, that's a huge deal, as well as being the first North American to ever be in the competition. And then being able to place in it was pretty cool. And so I got to go up on stage and get my little award. I think I have my award here also, but I can't find it right now. But anybody that has any questions, yep, there's my little award. And it says Cuarto is 4th. And so we got 4th place in the Coffee Festival in Marcala, which is a pretty good deal. There was a lot of people there from Germany, Japan, Canada that were there to attend that and then try to buy some of those coffees. I didn't really want to sell my coffee. The particular lot I had, I didn't have a lot of this year. And so I'd rather sell it to the guys that support us all through the year. Oh, and on my ticker, it says 4th place winner, Marcala Coffee Fest. But I hope I answered your question about how much waste is in a typical harvest. I'm not a tree hugging or anything like that. But once we moved to the farm and we watched how there was so much waste, and especially the big meals. They can buy it cheap enough. They're having to run 90 miles an hour, do it fast. And so they probably waste a lot more coffee than we do. But after we pulp the coffee, which means take the cherry off, our guys squat down and they're picking those cherries up off the ground and putting them, washing them off and throwing them in the machine. And so, we waste the least amount humanly possible. The machine gets cleaned between each variety of coffee. And so those guys scrape it out and go take it and dump that little bit of coffee they cleaned out. We just don't have a lot to waste. And it just seems a shame to waste it after you've gone through all the trouble, 4 years of, growing it. It just seems a shame to waste it. The coffees that do get mixed and matched and, the workers will take that home with them and they roast it on their little adobe stoves. And so I'm sure it gives a pretty unique flavor with 6 varieties and 3 different processes all mixed together. And then they cook it fairly dark. I've tried them a couple times. I've sent some coffee home with a few of the wives and they'll roast the coffee up on their stove and bring it back to me. To me, I don't have the most sophisticated tongue. And so it just tastes like really dark coffee to me. I can't pick out a lot of the attributes of it when it's that dark. I can generally tell you if a coffee's an 85 or an 86 and pick out some pretty good things about it. But as far as being able to pick like Better and some of those guys that are professional Q grading cuppers, as far as that goes, I'm a long ways from being able to do that. But I have a Hucky 500 sample roaster, and that's what I roast with. And so once that coffee's dried and in the bodega, we let it rest for about 30 days, and then we'll start pulling samples. I try to get everything as uniform as possible, and so I go 12 ounces in. I usually get between 12.3 and 10.3 and 10.5 ounces out. And so for me, that's a pretty level medium roast. And then that's the way we cup all our coffees on that same level playing field, so to speak. But I don't know if anybody else has any questions. I sure don't mind answering questions. The podcast will run, I think we're supposed to keep it at 30 minutes, but I'll still be online for a couple hours. I'll be working till at least 10 o'clock tonight. If anybody's got any time, they want to ask a few questions, or if you've got suggestions for what you'd like to see on the next podcast, always feel free and we'll cover it just as quick as we can. The next podcast is going to cover, we're going to start doing a worker interview. It's not going to be an interview necessarily. We've already talked to the worker, but we're going to get on there and talk about the different workers. Finca Anna, Finca Santos, Osman, Santiago, Pedro, those guys all have little farms that work for us, and we export their coffee to the States. I sell Anna and Bahidio's coffee online. The other ones have their own buyer, and so we shoot all the coffee to them. Anna this year will have a couple extra bags for sale, so if there's anybody that wants to buy some of that. But yeah, I'm glad everybody could join us. If you watch it on Instagram, or no, it's Facebook, YouTube, and those places, if you have any questions, just send them to us. And that's going to wrap up our 30 minutes for tonight. I appreciate you guys joining us, and let me know if you need anything at all. We're going to do another one. I think we're going to start doing it every Wednesday. And then we'll sort of go from there as to what you guys want to see and what you're interested in learning more about. And hope you guys can visit us on the farm sometime. Again, this is Ashley Williams, Legacy Farms Coffee, and we wish you guys a good night.